maybe not everybody out there knows that you practice Taekwondo.
I do. I'm a 4th degree black belt.
What similarities do you find between Taekwondo and drumming?
The need for balance and pacing and tempo and dynamics. Dynamic movement is as important as dynamic playing. And dynamics in Taekwondo isn't necessarily doing everything hard and fast and high. Just like dynamics in music isn't always necessarily loud and fast and hard. In fact, dynamics is neither all loud or the other misinformed approach of saying of dynamics is when you really want somebody to just play softer and you tell them to play with more dynamics, right? But playing soft all the time is no more playing dynamically than playing loud all the time, because dynamics is how you get from loud to soft and back. It's the process, it's the journeys, not the destination.
Today our guest is Ralph Peterson. Ralph, simply put, is a force of nature. I mean, the guy is a bull. And I say this with nothing but love and respect for the man. It's funny though, because the first time I spoke with Ralph, it was on a phone call that went for a while. He had been getting hip to the Meinl thing through one of his former students and now a fellow Meinl cymbal artist, Lyndon Rochelle, and was ready to make a change from his previous cymbal company. But first, he wanted to give me a call and feel it all out. I think I spent more time saying the word no to Ralph during that conversation than I had said during the entire year that my daughter was a 3-year-old and was testing every boundary she could test. Oddly enough, I have my suspicions that me saying no as much as I did is what made Ralph trust me. I say this because there's an alarming amount of false promises made in this industry. False promises that are made to entice an artist to come on board. And I'm sure Ralph has heard them all. So me being the sometimes too painfully honest person that I am, I think was Ralph's cue that he could work with Meinl. Plus, Ralph was definitely working by the motto that it never hurts to ask. And in his case, as in pretty much any musician's case, you have to go after it yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. And that's what Ralph is all about, going after it himself. That's why I call him a bull. He's relentless in his pursuit of whatever he does. Whether it's being one of the preeminent jazz drummers in the world, a professor at the famed Berklee College of Music in Boston, a band leader of multiple outfits, a sole proprietor of his own record label, a guy who has kicked cancer's ass while at the same time still training in Taekwondo. You name it, Ralph gets after things hard. Before we get into the podcast with Ralph, I'll share with you what one of my friends told me about Ralph. The late Joe Hibbs, who was among many things the AR manager for Mapex Drums at the time of his passing, once said this about Ralph. He's one of the last of the Mohicans. And I knew what he meant. Ralph was the last drummer chosen by Art Blakey to play for his Jazz Messengers. He was one of the last drummers that Elvin Jones called when he needed a sub. Ralph got his start at such a young age in the world of jazz, and he learned from the giants. That's what Hibbs was referring to. So he's been around the real deal enough to know the truth, but he's still relatively young enough to have his head in today's game. That's a rare combination. Last thing I'll say about Ralph. He pulls 0 punches in an interview. There's a couple of drummers that I could go see a clinic that they would put on, and if they did nothing but speak, I would learn a lot. The only 2 guys that immediately come to mind are Benny Greb and Ralph Peterson. So sit back and listen to Ralph lay some truth on you. I'd like to welcome everybody into the Meinl Radio Podcast. We've got my man, RP, Ralph Peterson, here today. Ralph, thank you for being here.
Always good to be with you, Chris. You're my man.
So, man, I'm going to launch straight into it. I had a list of questions, and I still have them, but there was one question I asked you earlier, and you said, ask that first.
Yeah.
So what I want to know is, what question are you tired of being asked?
The question that I'm tired of being asked is not necessarily a specific question, but it's a question that reveals a lack of homework on the part of the interviewer.
No pressure.
No, none at all, because you know my body of work and you're familiar with it, and so your questions are going to be informed from there, rather than asking, because you end up telling the same story over and over. If people ask you, so how did you start playing drums? And so who are your main influences? And, Drums were always in my family. My grandfather played cymbals in the church. My father, uncle played drums, and I grew up with drums and piano in the house. So that's the answer to the question. It doesn't bother me. It's just, you tend to run out of time. So if you go all the way back to the beginning every time, sometimes it's hip to talk about your story in the here and now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I guess I want to approach this from one angle. So we've got a lot of drummers, obviously, listening to this podcast, hopefully all drummers.
Mm-hmm.
Music
and not
lovers.
just drummers, hopefully.
Right, yeah, music lovers in general, guitarists, whatever. But my question is, because I don't think that everybody here has the depth of understanding of the specific genre that you're immersed in, which is jazz, that same understanding that you have. So tell our listeners what jazz is and tell them what jazz is not.
I'd rather free the listener from the need of having the level of understanding for the music that I have and tell them that it's not necessary.
Oh, okay.
That this music we call jazz, African American classical music, Black American music, America's contribution to world music art, can be enjoyed where you're at. Your entry point doesn't matter. As long as you keep exploring as a listener and stay open to the possibilities of hearing rules broken. Because in the words of Wayne Shorter, jazz is I dare you. The spirit of jazz is I dare you. Because we didn't come up with the word. The word was created by people who write about it.
This is a great spot to go into my next question. It's been documented in many books and on film many times. Where and how did this form of music, of I Dare You, come to be?
It grows out of the African American experience. Through the Caribbean, from the west coast of Africa, through the Caribbean, into the Gulf area, New Orleans, Mississippi, Chicago, Kansas City, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, LA. And the particular chronology of it can be argued by reasonable people, and it's from a historical acumen or standpoint, it's important to know, but it's not necessary to know to enjoy the music.
No, of course not. I only ask because I'm a geek for history, and I think it would be. I thought it would be neat to ask someone like you that is it's encompassed your life.
Well, it has, but I didn't grow up in it. I grew up around it, but I'm not a jazz baby. I'm a funk baby. I'm an R&B funk baby. And, but like the Stones in the fountain in Godfather 3, in the scene where Michael Corleone is talking with the priest, and he says, the stone is immersed in water, and then he cracks it open and he says, but the center is dry, it hasn't penetrated. I was maybe 17, 18, or 19 before jazz actually began to penetrate my outer musical surface, Now, I listened to a lot of instrumental R&B, what most people now call smooth jazz. But then you end up talking more about the labels than you talk about the music. I grew up listening to Earl Klugh and Grover Washington and Tower Power and Earth, Wind and Fire. Maurice White played with Ramsey Lewis, played in the Ramsey Lewis trio. So to say that there's no connection between R&B and jazz, or that they're somehow separate genres, is really a statement of ignorance. You know, so for the listener, it's important to listen to what speaks to you and follow that. And if you stay open-minded, you'll eventually discover that it's tied to something that maybe you hadn't expected it to be tied to.
And when you say you were about 17 or 18 before it started to get to you, before you were penetrated, do you remember if there was sort of an aha moment, maybe there was something you were listening to that you thought, man,
Yes.
I feel
there
this.
was one record in particular,
What was that?
Trumpet Kings, Roy Eldridge and Dizzy Gillespie. Because before then, as a fledgling trumpet player, I thought Maynard Ferguson was God, because I never heard anybody play that high. Then I heard Dizzy Gillespie, because I had heard Clifford Brown, and I was like, I'll never be able to do that on a trumpet. And I heard Maynard Ferguson, I was like, okay, and I was like about to push the mouthpiece out the back of my head trying to play that high and killing myself, creating all kinds of, cerebral hemorrhage pressure in my temples, right, in high school band, in marching band. And then I found a new baby tune on the record Trumpet Kings. And Dizzy Gillespie went up there and played a whole bunch of Clifford Brown sounding kind of stuff in the sound range frequency of the dog whistle frequency of Maynard Ferguson. I was like, oh, this is different. And so then there was another one at Rutgers when I first heard Philly Joe Jones. I first heard Blakey. Now this music was around me the whole time. So as I discovered it, as my knowledge expanded, my father's record collection would 1, 2, 3, 5 records at a time every time I came home from college would evaporate. And that's my process. And I'm still in it. I'm still searching. I'm still discovering, players and music. I did an interview yesterday with one of my students former students from Berkeley who's now in grad school, and they asked me what I first thought about Charlie Parker, and the honest answer about that is that I didn't like him when I first heard it. Everybody wants to be hip enough to say that they were in love with Bird from the moment they heard him, but
I think it's hard to be in love with Bird the moment you hear him. That's some out there stuff.
It is highly intellectual, sophisticated, harmonically sophisticated music. It's like saying that you dug Mahler the first time you heard him,
I get that.
And so I had to grow into an appreciation for Charlie Parker. Yeah.
I totally get that. There's music that you can hear and listen to, and you hear it and you listen to, but you're not ready to receive it until a certain spot in your life.
Sometimes there's music that strikes a chord in you that makes you uncomfortable. And you don't like that feeling. It may be calling on something from another life. Who knows? Not to get too existential, but I truly believe that everything that's in the universe has been in the universe since the beginning of the universe. Energy in the universe is neither lost or gained, it simply changes form. So that's how you see the reincarnation of great musicians in young musicians, because the energy just resurfaces in different forms and in different lives. So I don't want to get too heady about that.
No, it's totally interesting.
Yeah.
Well, moving along a little bit, maybe not everybody out there knows that you practice Taekwondo.
I do. I'm a 4th degree black belt.
What similarities do you find between Taekwondo and drumming?
The need for balance and pacing and tempo and dynamics. Dynamic movement is as important as dynamic playing. And dynamics in Taekwondo isn't necessarily doing everything hard and fast and high. Just like dynamics in music isn't always necessarily loud and fast and hard. In fact, dynamics is neither all loud or the other misinformed approach of saying of dynamics is when you really want somebody to just play softer and you tell them to play with more dynamics, right? But playing soft all the time is no more playing dynamically than playing loud all the time, because dynamics is how you get from loud to soft and back. It's the process, not it's the journeys, not the destination. So it's like that in life, and so is it like that in martial arts, because when you become a black belt, when you become a first-degree black belt, you know, when you're a white belt, yellow belt, all the under belts, you look at becoming a black belt as achieving this level of proficiency, and as soon as they tie the belt around you, people who are black belts say to you, congratulations, now your training can begin. Because you, as in the world of black belts, you are the white belt of black belts now.
And all a black belt is, first degree would be a white belt that stuck with it.
Yeah. That's all a black belt is a white belt that didn't quit. You know, and so those kinds of lessons have informed my writing, my playing, my concept as a band leader. It really is all inclusive. As an educator, absolutely.
So moving right along, our friend, the late great Joe Hibbs, who used to work for Mapex, he once called you the last of the Mohicans, and I've used that to describe you quite a bit ever since then. Because at a very early age, you were under the tutelage of some of jazz's giants. Art Blakey, Elvin Jones. Elvin Jones called you to be a sub for him on one of his gigs, right?
That's right. I'm the last drummer called by Elvin Jones to sub for him. With all due respect to all the people that have done many tributes and sat in on Elvin's gig, when Elvin needs somebody to cover for him, he called me. Now, and the truth don't need defending. It is what it is. And then in 1983, I played with Art Blakey. In 1982, I sat in with Art Blakey for the first time. And in March of 1983, I became the last Jazz Messenger drummer to play in the Jazz Messenger two-drummer big band with Art Blakey. And so while those are nice bragging rights, what come with them is a deep sense of responsibility to carry forward the standards of truth and excellence that they represented in the music. And that's, to me, what's most important about the experience. That I have the opportunity now to record my second big band record with two drummers. And the first record is out now. It's called I Remember Boo. It's on my label, the Onyx Productions music label. And it's a two-drummer Jazz Messenger tribute big band to Art Blakey. And so 35 years after it happened for me, I'm now kind of recreating a similar experience for my students. You know, it's the way that Art Blakey lives forever. And I believe, you know, to whatever extent it's important, it's my path to immortality too.
Well, this leads me to my question. So I don't know how many other guys were as fortunate as you to have experienced having these lessons and this knowledge, this system handed down to them by the old guard. So based off of you knowing how many of those guys did get that handed off to them that are still out there doing it, do you think there's some things that just got lost forever from the old guard, or was there enough of it passed down?
Because that's what Joe is saying. What Joe is saying when he calls me one of the last of the Mohicans is that I'm the old guard now.
How many others are out there?
There are a lot.
Are there? Okay.
There are a lot.
Yeah.
Kenny Washington and Lewis Nash and Cindy Blackman and Terry Lynn Carrington, Neil Smith and Greg Hutchinson and Jeff Hamilton and you know, I mean, I could sit here and name names of cats in my generation and guys who've come behind me who are on this instrument alone, who are guarding the gates of truth.
So
because that's what I believe my role as an educator is. I'm a centurion. My job is to protect and guard the truth as it was handed to me by the masters. And to my students, I'm their guy now. You know, there's no path to jazz messenger through any other drummer except me. Why? Because I'm the guy Art Blakey picked. There are a lot of drummers that in this next 2019 will pay tribute to Art Blakey because it'll be a centennial birthday, and more power to them, and they are worthy and able, and if I were king of the world, everybody would celebrate Art Blakey every day anyway. But I'm the glass guy he picked, and there ain't no getting around that.
So it sounds like you take heart in knowing that there's a lot of guardians of the truth out there. It's not just you, there's more that are out there.
Not only just me, and there are a lot of great students. I say this all the time on gigs, especially with this young big band. You know, the future of the music is so bright. I gotta wear shades.
Hey, that leads me to my next question.
Okay.
What's your very favorite band you've ever played in and why?
Oh, that's a loaded question. That's like asking who my favorite drummer is.
Come on, man.
You know.
No one's gonna get their feelings hurt.
No, it's not a question that I can answer. I don't accept the premise of the question.
Okay. How would you rephrase it?
What's the greatest thing about every band you've played in?
Well, we
because
don't have that
every
much time.
band is a favorite.
Sure.
For a reason, you know. I mean, I got as much joy playing with Michael Brecker as I did playing with David Murray, as I did playing with Stanley Turrentine, as I did playing with Charles Lloyd, which are about as four different approaches to the saxophone as there could be. My job is to find the thing in each musical setting to get hyped about and to make my favorite, whether it's about the swing, whether it's about the groove in odd meter, whether it's about the feeling of Afro-Cuban and triangular that's always present, whether it's the organ sound in unity, which represents my musical adolescence and upbringing through Newark, and you know, it's hard. I can't.
I totally get it.
It's like saying, which one of your parents do you love more?
Right,
it's
right.
Crazy.
Yeah, of course.
It's a crazy question.
I'm here to ask you crazy questions,
Okay.
Ralph. What's one record you cut your teeth on that coming up that still keeps on giving?
Oh, well, that's kind of easy. Trumpet Kings. Dizzy Gillespie, Roy Eldridge. Red Clay, Freddie Hubbard. Maiden Voyage, Herbie Hancock. Imperial Isles, I'm sorry, the one with one finger snap.
You still hear things from these records that surprise you. You went, wow, heard that. I never heard that before.
Yeah, I never heard it that way. It's like, you know, sitting in a different part of the room at a different part of the day looking at a painting from a different angle and different light.
Yeah.
You'll see something in the spring that you won't see in the fall because the light is different, you know. And so I hear things at 56 that I didn't hear at 26 because my light is different, you know. My viewpoint is different. My perspective is different. What I hear is different. My ability to hear one thing in relationship to something else is different. So in a way, you could say that about all records.
Sure.
Unity the Larry Young record with Woody Shaw and Joe Henderson and Elvin. I mean, you know, all of my favorite records. Joe Henderson's The Isotope. I mean, you know, these are the records that I teach my belief system in music through. You know, and I say that almost in a spiritual, with a spiritual connotation, because that's how I share it.
Well, since we're talking about albums,
Uh-huh.
so if an alien came to Earth and said, you know, what's jazz? And he needs you to hand him an album because he's got a turntable and he wants you to give him, you know, it's like in the back of the package of bacon where it says to view Representative Slice. What one album would you give him and say, here's the best I can give you because that's a huge, broad thing? What would
Free
you hand him?
Fall.
Free Fall?
Blakey.
Art
Jazz
Blakey.
Message.
That'd be the one?
That'd be the one. You got straight ahead, you got shuffle, you've got kind of Brazilian shuffle nova, I call it, bossa nova, the way Blakey played it. Yeah, that would definitely be one. If it was one of my records, I'd give him Subliminal Seduction. Or Dream Deferred. Yeah.
Did you ever flirt with playing fusion?
No, I played fusion. I didn't flirt. I was associate producer on a record by a bass player named Kevin Harris, who played with Cassandra Wilson and Steve Coleman. And the record's called Folk Song, Folk Tales. It's a completely electric record, you know. That's something that I could revisit in the near future. You know, the 30th anniversary of the Fotet is coming next year, as well as the 100th anniversary of Art Blakey. So revisiting that configuration and finding new approaches to it, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, given my earlier statement about the universe, you know, and what I was taught by my trumpet teacher, Bill Fielder, is nothing new under the sun. Till you discover it, then it's new. That's what's so funny about young people, you know, because they, with such authority, discover shit that's been here for 60 years. And, you know, they're calling it the new thing. And they don't want to do the other thing because they haven't figured it. They haven't lived long enough to figure out how the other thing is connected to the thing that they just discovered and think is new. It's kind of cute to watch.
Did you ever do that?
That's why it's cute. That's why you the laughter is out of identification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier, we've been talking about labels, people giving things labels, and earlier you mentioned smooth jazz. Mm-hmm. How do you feel when you hear smooth jazz? What comes to mind? Do you enjoy listening to what is currently today known as smooth jazz?
First of all, I have difficulty with the label.
How come?
Because I believe instrumental R&B is more appropriate. Mm. And I got that definition from one of the people who probably made the most money making that music, and that was Earl Klugh. And so if Earl Klugh calls it instrumental R&B, and there's very few people in the history of that genre that have created more music or made more money, I'm rolling with him.
Okay, I have to ask.
So let me answer the question, though.
Okay, please.
Because my difficulty with the music grows out of my difficulty with R&B. Because smooth jazz is less jazz than it is R&B. There are elements of jazz in it, you know. There are elements of turmeric in curry, but turmeric itself isn't curry. You know what I mean? So R&B, for the most part, has become formula-oriented. And the A&R people influence the artists, and the artists, by and large, too often imitate each other in an attempt to arrive at the formula that will make them as much money as the last person who made a pile of money. So making money becomes the objective of the creation. And there's an art to that. I'll grant that there's an art to that. But that's not why I play music.
So getting back to instrumental R&B, at what point did it stop being creative?
Oh, it's hard for me to, first of all, I don't want to spend too much time jumping up and down on a genre that I used to play.
Okay.
And that I may return to at some point.
Got to keep your friends.
At any point.
Yeah.
You know, if Regina Bell, who I went to college with, wants to call me for a gig with Kurt Whalum on it, I'm going. Okay? Because I got pocket down to my socks and inside my boot, if necessary, that been living there since I was 14, 15, 16 years old. You know, it's just that the artist in me likes to dabble in it in more metrically challenging environments. You know what I mean? If I can make a person bob their head in 9 or 11 or 13, not because it's 9 or 11 or 13, but because that's just how long the bass line is before it loops, you know, then to me, I'm still playing funk. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like schwunk. Swinging funk, schwunk, you know.
So
yeah.
I got one last question for you.
Okay.
Everybody out there needs to know this. Here it is, man. Here's your time for shameless self-promotion.
Here we go.
What are you currently up to these days? I know, but I want them to know. And where and how can listeners learn more about you?
Last question first. www.ralphpetersonmusic.com, Facebook.com/Ralph Jr. Peterson, RPonics at Twitter and Instagram. There is a lot going on, and so I'm really focusing and concentrating so that I don't leave anything out. August 4th, we released I Remember Boo, 2-drummer, 20-piece big band in dedication to Art Blakey with Donald Harrison, Jazz Messenger alumni special guest. 2 weeks after that, we released Inward Venture by the group Aggregate Prime. That's Gary Thomas, Mark Whitfield, his son Davis Whitfield. And Curtis Lundy's on bass on the record, and Kenny Davis plays most of the gigs. That record is currently out and getting good reviews, and you can find both of those on CD Baby and iTunes and Bandcamp. 2 weeks after that, I recorded with a group called The Messenger Legacy, which is a sextet Jazz Messenger configuration of all Jazz Messenger alumni: Bobby Watson, Brian Lynch, Bill Pierce, Jeffrey Keyser, and Essiet. And we're playing the music of the Jazz Messengers, and that record will be released in February of next year, coinciding with Art Blakey's centennial birthday. That group is touring extensively in 2019. And we got 2 West Coast runs, an Australia run, and we're going to China in June, and we're playing the Kennedy Center in May. So it's a lot of exciting stuff going on with the label. I'm just fighting real hard to make sure I stay here. You know, I've had some challenges, and I'm fighting back, and those challenges are heading in the right direction. We got the big C on the run again, and so apparently I'm not finished because I've had enough chances to not be here, and we've lost so many people so recently. You know, Roy Hargrove, Jerry Gonzalez, Sonny Fortune. It's just been crazy. And so I'm working with a sense of urgency that, like our Blakey said, tomorrow's never promised. And I look behind me and I see a body of work, and so I'm okay. But there's still more to do. Fotet needs to be reunited. I need to do an organ record with Kevin Eubanks. There's a lot of stuff that has been talked about that in the last 3 months that is going to carry us into 2019 and 2020.
Makes me wonder if your students at Berkeley would say, like the sense of urgency you're talking about, would your students at Berkeley say that maybe you're like pushing them harder than ever now, you know, or are you?
Because I'm pushing myself,
right?
They can't whine and complain because they're young.
Yeah.
You know, and they got that, and, you know, most of them are thin and young, so they make me real double sick, you know. As hard as I'm in the gym like 5:30, 4 days a week, and two more days a week I'm doing the gym and then Taekwondo just to stay at this size. You know, of course, it might have something to do with what goes in, but we're not going to talk about that because we're in Nashville anyway.
Right.
And, you know, that's, you know.
We see some barbecue in the
Hostile
future.
We're in a hostile environment in terms of weight loss right now. But my students know that I both love them and don't give a damn about their feelings. That my job is not to be their friend, but they can count on me. Because my job is to make sure that they deal with the truth in the music as it was taught to me. And for them to learn that there are some requirements to get to the place of the people they admire, you know. And while I try to stay both an inspirer, I try to also be one of those guys. Too many educators are not practitioners anymore. Just like in martial arts, too many instructors don't compete ever anymore, you know what I mean? And so you have to stay in the game in order for your students to respect what you were trying to teach them. You know, because then it's not do as I say. It's look at what I'm doing. You don't believe what I'm saying? Look at what I'm doing. You know. As a matter of fact, trust what I do more than what I say, because it'll tell you who I am. And so if I'm driving back from New York and can make a 9 o'clock big band rehearsal on Tuesday morning, damn it, you can get across town and get there on time. And if you have a problem, there'll be somebody sitting in your chair when you come in. I don't care about the grade, because what you need to learn is how expendable and replaceable you are in the music community, because there's always some kid somewhere practicing their ass off. So you don't have to, you know. But when they blow by you, right? You know, don't blame Prof. I tried to tell you. You know, truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off.
I love it. We're going to stop there.
Cool.
Ralph, thanks so much, man.
Thank you, man. It's always a pleasure, Chris.
Thanks for listening to Meinl Radio. If you liked this episode, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We would appreciate it very much. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.